Welcome to the deep dive. We're looking at a security incident today that, well, it's pretty much the nightmare scenario, isn't it?
It really is.
Almost 2 full months of undetected access inside an enterprise network. And it all kicked off from something so simple. A single click.
Yeah, a deceptive one. It's this perfect storm, really. You've got
Yeah.
some seriously sophisticated tradecraft from the threat group Lunar Spider, in this case,
Right.
but it collides head-on with, well, a basic security mistake. We've dug into the sources detailing this whole thing. Our mission here is to break down how they did it. It's multi-stage, 5 different kinds of malware.
Wow.
And it all hinges on exploiting this one overlooked configuration file. It basically handed them everything.
And the speed is just alarming. You click on what looks like a tax form Monday, and by Wednesday, these guys, Lunar Spider, they've got domain admin, full control. And then it stretches into this long, quiet data theft over 2 months. It's kind of terrifying.
It is. Let's unpack it, starting right at the beginning, that first click.
Okay, so what was it? What did the user actually click on?
It was social engineering 101, really, disguised as business as usual. The initial vector was a JavaScript file,
Okay.
heavily obfuscated, naturally, but made to look like a standard IRS tax form, a W-9 specifically. And this particular dropper is linked to Latrodectus version 1.3.
So someone thinks they're just opening a tax document, maybe for a contractor or something.
Exactly.
And bam, that one click sets off a whole chain reaction. What happens right after that?
Well, that JavaScript is essentially the stage 1 installer. It immediately pulls down a multi-stage MSI package.
An MSI, okay.
And this installer then uses a legitimate Windows tool, Rundle32, to load the brute Ratel DLL.
Ah, brute Ratel. So not your average script kiddie tool.
No, definitely not. Brute Ratel is, well, think of it like a newer, stealthier Cobalt Strike. It's designed specifically to evade detection. So seeing that right away tells you these guys are serious.
How fast did they go from getting that brute Ratel running to actually, establishing control?
Oh, it was immediate. Its main job here was to inject another piece of malware, the Latrodectus downloader, directly into the Explorer.exe process.
Injecting into Explorer.exe. That's a classic way to hide, right?
It is. Blends right in with normal Windows activity. And that payload, the Latrodectus downloader, immediately phoned home, set up its command and control, its C2.
Yeah.
And it didn't just use one C2 server, it used multiple domains, all proxy through Cloudflare.
Yep.
That's for resilience,
Yeah.
Makes it harder to just block one IP and shut them down.
So in that first hour, are they just setting up shop, or are they actively poking around?
Oh, they're active. Straight away. Within the hour, they're running basic recon. Built-in Windows commands, kipconfig, system info, WAMI, standard stuff.
Just mapping the place out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Figuring out where they are, who they are on the system, what the network looks like. And get this, within about 6 hours, they'd already set up VNC remote access using a back connect session.
Wow, VNC, so they could actually see the desktop and interact.
Pretty much, yeah. Like they were sitting right there.
That back connect capability often points towards ISID infrastructure, which has known links to Latrodectus. It shows real confidence in their foothold. They weren't just dropping implants. They were prepping for hands-on work.
Okay, so they're in, they're looking around, they've got remote access. But then comes day 3. You mentioned this critical flaw. This is the moment everything changed, right?
This is the pivot, the kind of mistake that keeps security teams up at night. While they were just doing basic file browsing, they stumbled upon a file named unattend.xml.
Unattend.xml. Okay, for folks listening who maybe aren't deep into Windows sysadmin stuff, what is that file?
It's called a Windows answer file. IT teams use it to automate Windows installations, setting up the machine name, network settings, joining a domain.
Right, unattended setup.
Exactly. And critically, it can also pre-configure user accounts, including the initial administrator account. And the kicker here, this specific file contained domain administrator credentials in plaintext.
Oh, come on. Plaintext, domain admin.
Plaintext, domain admin. That's not even really a hack. That's just finding the keys taped under the doormat.
It basically is all that sophisticated malware, the brute Ratel, the injection. Suddenly, it's almost secondary. They didn't need exploits or password cracking. They just logged in. Legitimate, highest privilege credentials. It was a gift. Completely bypassed pretty much every other defense.
Unbelievable. And while this is happening, while they find the keys, they were still running other stuff in parallel. You mentioned the Latrodectus sealer module.
That's right. They'd actually downloaded that earlier via a C2 command.
Yeah.
And it was pretty comprehensive.
What could it grab?
Credentials from something like over 29 different Chromium-based browsers. Think Chrome, Edge, Brave.
Okay.
Microsoft Outlook configurations, too, across a bunch of versions, even older MAPI profiles. And it was organized. It tagged the stolen data copies for browser passwords, Outlook Pass for Outlook stuff.
So even without finding that unattend.xml file, they were already geared up for significant credential theft.
Definitely. They had multiple paths to success. The unattend.xml file just gave them the super fast track.
Right. So they've got the master keys, they've vacuumed up browser and Outlook creds. Let's move into part 2, days 4 and 5. This is where they really start using that domain admin power, right? Weaponizing it.
Precisely. First order of business, make sure that domain admin access is persistent and easy to use. They enabled the Windows secondary logon service.
Why that service?
It lets you use the runas command. So they could easily launch processes as the domain admin, even if their initial foothold was some low-privilege user account from that first click. It's a quick privilege jump.
But they also did something fancier, didn't they, to avoid setting off alarms?
Yeah, they didn't just rely on runas. This is where the more advanced tradecraft pops back up. They performed a user account control bypass, UAC bypass.
Okay, how'd they manage that?
They used a Cobalt Strike implant, specifically a DLL, named sys.dll, and exploited a known technique involving token duplication.
Token duplication. Can you break that down simply? What does it let them do?
Sure. Basically, it involves hijacking a part of the Windows registry related to the msettings protocol handler. This trick allows a program running with normal user rights to effectively steal the security token from a high-privilege system process.
Ah, so they get elevated privileges.
Without the user ever seeing that UAC prompt asking for permission. It's silent elevation. Very sneaky.
Okay, so now they're domain admin. They've bypassed UAC. Day 4 sounds like it was deployment day.
Big time. They started acting like internal IT, but, for malicious purposes. They used PsExec, a legitimate sysadmin tool, combined with those stolen DA credentials.
And where did they push tools to?
The crown jewels. Domain controllers, naturally, file servers, backup servers. They dropped Cobalt Strike beacons on all of them. Standard playbook. Secure access to the most critical systems first.
And they weren't just relying on Cobalt Strike, were they? They brought their own custom tools, too.
That's right. Redundancy again. They deployed a custom backdoor written .NET, and they cleverly named it LSASS.exe.
Trying to blend in with the real LSASS.exe Windows process, I assume.
Exactly. LSASS instead of LSASS. Easy to miss. This backdoor called home every 250 seconds or so. And for persistence, it created a scheduled task called scheduler LSASS to make sure it ran again if the machine rebooted.
They were really digging in. Were they already trying to move sideways at this point?
Oh, yeah. They weren't just sitting on those initial boxes. They actually deployed another custom tool specifically to try and exploit the Zerologon vulnerability against a second domain controller.
Zerologon CVE 2020-1472. That was a nasty one.
Very nasty. Allowed easy domain controller compromise. Now, some of their other attempts around this time apparently failed. They tried a Metasploit reverse shell that didn't connect back. But still, the pace was intense. They were going for full domain control.
And then day 5 gives us that crucial clue about where they were coming from.
Yeah, this was a slip-up, a classic OPSE mistake, even for pros. They used standard remote desktop, RDP, using those stolen DA creds, to connect to 2 more servers. And during the RDP handshake, the authentication process logged the source host name of the machine they were connecting from.
And what was it?
It was VPS2DA3222TLE that immediately pointed investigators to a German VPS provider called VPS2DAY, also known as Cervinga, a concrete lead on their infrastructure.
So days 1 to 5 were frantic. Recon, credential theft, escalation deployment, lateral movement attempts.
A whirlwind, really.
Which brings us to part 3. And this is where it gets weird. The pace just stops.
Yeah.
They go quiet for almost 2 months. What does that tell you?
It tells me they were patient, and they felt secure. The intense, hands-on activity pretty much ceased after day 5, but crucially, they weren't gone.
Right.
They kept their access alive. Intermittent check-ins through Backconnect, through Ratel, through Cobalt Strike. Those beacons and backdoors were still working. They'd established their presence on key systems and were just waiting for the right time to act, presumably.
That quiet period, that long dwell time, it's chilling. So after that 15-day gap between day 5 activity and day 20, they finally make their move. What was the objective?
Data exfiltration. On day 20, they popped back up, specifically on the file share server. They deployed a small toolkit designed purely for stealing data.
What was in the kit?
A VB script to launch things, a batch script, run.bat, and the core component, Rclone.
Rclone, the sync tool.
Exactly. Very powerful, often used legitimately, which helps it blend in. But they renamed the Rclone binary to chosts.exe. Again, trying to mimic a system process.
Clever. How did the exfil actually work, and how long did it take?
They used Rclone configured to sync data via FTP, uploading directly to a remote server they controlled. And it wasn't quick. The logs show it ran for 9 hours and 46 minutes straight.
Almost 10 hours of data flowing out. But you mentioned earlier even sophisticated actors make mistakes. Did they stumble here?
They did. And it's kind of amusing in a way. The source analysis shows they actually struggled to get the Rclone configuration right. They had to drop the config file onto the server twice.
Twice.
The first time, apparently there was a syntax error. Something about a drive letter was wrong in the config. They fixed that, dropped it again. But then the second time, they had messed up the FTP username.
No way.
Yeah, the logs show the first attempt used the username JGLButNabrobdi1S322. Then they dropped a corrected config using JGPNabrobdi1S3 They literally had a typo in their own username for the FTP server.
That's incredible. It just humanizes them, doesn't it? Behind all the complex malware, it's still someone typing, making typos.
Absolutely. It shows friction. It wasn't a perfectly smooth operation despite the long planning time. Even after that huge data haul, they weren't quite done. 6 days later, day 26, they're back again.
Where did they focus this time?
The backup server. And they were after one specific thing, credentials stored by the backup software itself.
Targeting Veeam, right? Using that public PowerShell script.
Exactly. They use the veeam-trids.ps1 script. It's well known, publicly available. It's designed to pull credentials that Veeam stores, often in plaintext or easily decryptable formats, so it can run backup jobs automatically.
Why go after backup creds so late in the game?
Couple of possibilities. Those creds often have very high privileges, maybe even different ones than the domain admin they already had. Also, it could be about ultimate persistence. Even if the main DA password gets changed, maybe the backup account won't. Or maybe they were prepping for a final destructive phase like ransomware, which often involves deleting backups. Getting those creds would help.
Makes sense. And what was the very last thing they were seen doing? Day 28.
The last recorded hands-on activity was them deploying and running RustScan, a network scanner, from that same backup server.
What were they scanning for?
Looks like they were scanning wide network ranges, specifically looking for open SMB ports Windows file sharing. It suggests they were maybe planning another round of lateral movement or just doing a final broad network assessment.
And critically, despite having full control for 2 months, despite grabbing backup credentials, no ransomware was actually deployed before they got kicked out.
Correct. As far as the analysis shows, the final action observed was data exfiltration and network scanning. No ransomware detonation occurred before containment.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together. Synthesize the tradecraft. We saw this mix of frameworks, Ratel, Latrodectus, Cobalt Strike, even some custom stuff. What really stands out technically about how they stayed hidden?
The core technique was definitely process injection. Heavy reliance on it.
Right.
Ratel and Latrodectus hiding in Explorer.exe. Cobalt Strike later hiding in scihost.exe and spoolssv.exe. They were trying very hard to look like normal system activity, and of course deleting their tools after use to clean up tracks.
But against all that technical skill, the story keeps coming back to the simple things, the human errors.
Absolutely. Those are maybe the biggest takeaways. First, the massive oversight. Leaving plaintext DA credentials in an unattend.xml file. That's foundational. It shouldn't happen.
But then you also see the attacker's human side. The sources mention them struggling for hours with file permissions using ICLs. They couldn't access the output of their own adfind scans for a while. They were literally fighting Windows permissions despite being domain admin.
That's almost comical. And then the RDP hostname leak, the Rclone typos.
Yeah, it just reinforces that the human element is often the weakest link. For the defenders who made the initial config error, and for the attackers who fumble commands under pressure.
It paints a picture of a capable group, willing to play the long game, but not infallible.
Exactly. They did massive Active Directory recon with adfind. They set up multiple layers of persistence. They targeted backup creds. All signs point to them preparing for something big, maybe destructive, even if what we saw was just data exfiltration in the end.
So for me, the big lesson here is about persistence through redundancy. It wasn't one magic trick. It was multiple malware types, multiple C2 methods, multiple ways to stay embedded, lasting almost 60 days.
That's a perfect summary. And it leaves us with, I think, a really important question for you, the listener, to think about.
Go on.
If one single click, one moment of inattention, can lead to an adversary having 2 months with the keys to the kingdom. How often are these seemingly harmless configuration files, like that Windows answer file, or maybe forgotten credentials buried in some utility or backup software? How often are they the real weak link, the thing that lets an old breach linger or a new one escalate instantly? What forgotten file, what old account might be sitting in your environment right now just waiting?